let's get down to it. The financial field is pretty serious, potentially boring, and there's a disconnect between the language within the financial services industry and what the general public can understand or is interested in. So, as a financial professional who wants to help people connect with them and educate them about money, the greatest challenge to creating content is figuring out what will stick with your listeners. And to put something else plainly on the table, since you spend most of your time in this very left brain field of numbers and logic and analysis, it's not likely that you're just a natural at some of the right brain skills like humor, intuition, and creativity, which can make it really hard to accomplish your goal with your content. That's why I'm really excited for you to meet Ryan Doolittle today. He's the host behind the Happiest Retirees podcast, where he brings the aspirational piece of retirement, like the cool hobbies and reignited passion projects that people do in retirement, to pre-retirees to get us thinking about what we might do when we retire. He's also a writer and a producer for the Retire Sooner and Money Matters teams, and a copywriter for Capital Investment Advisors. He takes us behind the scenes in today's episode and shares details about how to hone your interview skills, the specific segments of his show, and how he creates each piece. Plus, you get to hear how he thinks about creating financial content that's relatable. Ryan, thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate it. And I appreciate that we're matching. It's so funny.
It's the only way I would do this is if you and I could match.
Totally unplanned. I love that. But clearly we're on the same wavelength. So
yes.
You're a writer and a producer for the Retire Sooner and Money Matters teams. Would you tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got there?
Yeah, so Money Matters is a long-running radio show on WSB Radio in Atlanta, and the host is Wes Moss, and now he has a couple of co-hosts, Jeff Lloyd and Connor Miller. So I help, produce content for that, although they do, I can't take the bulk of the credit. They do most of that. They're really good at it. And that is also a podcast now. So you can listen in podcast form at yourwealth.com. Mm-hmm. Then Wes also has his own solo podcast called Retire Sooner. And he's transitioning to work with Krista DiBiase. She works with, she's sort of Clark Howard's right hand. So that she's on the show a lot with him now, and they go through listener questions and talk about, retiring sooner and happier and all that. They get into the finances and the lifestyle and all that. So I have my own show. I feel like I'm just rattling off names here, but I have my own show called Happiest Retirees Podcast, where I'm the host and, producer. The reason or the way I got into all this was through writing, because that's my primary function. It's a really weird sort of path that I still talk to Wes sometimes and say, like, why did you hire me? How did this even happen? I'm like a writer and comedian living in LA, and Wes is a financial advisor in Atlanta. And he was writing a book called You Can Retire Sooner Than You Think. Mm-hmm. And he's a really smart guy and talented. And so he had a lot of it ready or at least kind of there. But he needed someone to kind of punch it up and add, kind of make it funnier, I guess you'd say, because that's one thing that's sometimes lacking in the financial world is making things kind of interesting to read. Even if it's like the right bit of info, if it's not interesting, it's hard to get people to read it. So, and Wes is good at making things interesting, but he wanted a little bit of help. So I was at the time somehow introduced to him. We wrote a book. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I remember at the time I couldn't get cell reception in my apartment, so I'm like sitting in my car, like just talking through chapters, and that turned into a book. So then the book did better than we thought, and so a few years later, Wes was like, "Hey, I'm going to do another book called What the Happiest Retirees Know, and I'd like to do it with you again." So we got the band back together. Our editor's name is Bree. She's fantastic, and we wrote another book, and then that sort of turned into helping Wes with all sorts of content. So now I'm just a full-time Wes head. I don't know. I don't know the name. I'm full-time with Wes, and it's sort of blossomed into so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, it sounds like a writer's dream. Like,
yeah,
you get involved with someone who's bound and determined to actually create content, and one project turns into another. Then we're going into podcasting. We've got 2 books under our belt. Then I'm assuming you're doing stuff for their websites and other content as well.
yeah.
Sounds amazing. As long as you have some level of interest in personal finance and helping with his mission, sounds like a done deal.
It's really, it is a dream come true in a way, because one thing writers and people in comedy know well is that it's just so unpredictable. You can go from doing something great to like having nothing, and you're almost cursed with this interest in that field in a way, but you don't want to do anything else, so you're kind of stuck with it. So you do things here and there, but so working in this field has been so stable and steady. But the most joyful thing for me is that they like what I do. I didn't know anything about the financial world, and I just happened to stumble into a financial company that really likes humor and really likes interesting writing. And so I feel so lucky that they want me around. I'm always telling them, "So you're sure that I'm valuable here?" And they seem to say yes. So I'm not gonna question it anymore.
Yeah. I would take it and go with it.
Yeah.
So something you said really stood out, and it's that a lot of financial content and financial advisors, whether financial professionals in general, struggle to create content that connects with people. And maybe you didn't use those words exactly, but you're saying like funny or relatable. And I think that is the challenge, because there's enough informative content out there when it comes to personal finance. And yes, there can always be more, could always be created from a fresh perspective. But I think that really is the struggle of creating, financial education that is something people can hold on to and that it really applies to their life. And so I'm thinking also from the financial professional's perspective that finding you is a dream, because that's what everybody's kind of working through, right? When they're thinking about, okay, well, I know I need to create content online. I know content has this attractive power to draw people into my business and help them become clients, because it helps me become more relatable. It helps me share my perspective and allows them to get to know me a little bit better before they're, going to book a meeting with me. But they struggle with how to do that. And I think that's where the value of someone in your position comes in. So I know you said like, gosh, I don't know how this happened or how I got introduced to Wes, or like, can you remember any of those details, or maybe just advise someone on what to look for in a writer for their brand?
It was pretty random. Wes was looking for someone to help him, and I just happened to fall into someone said, "How about this guy?" type of thing.
That's awesome.
So right place, right time for me is how that happened. As far as advice for financial professionals looking to find a person like that, wow, that's a good question. I mean, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, keep your mind open, because, like, to Wes's credit, he immediately accepted what I was bringing, and I think he knew this is going to make what I'm doing more relatable. But some financial advisors they're so smart, right, that maybe that could get in their way if they're meeting someone who obviously doesn't know as much as them, and they might think, well, what is this person going to bring? But if you can find someone who has sort of that Main Street instead of Wall Street mentality, who needs to explain things in a way that regular people will get, and do it in a way where they're kind of like, oh, I enjoyed that, that's going to really increase how many people are listening or reading or whatever, because most people aren't financial advisors. So if you're trying to work with people who aren't, you need to go where they are. You need to meet them where they are, I guess I'd say. As far as where to find those people, I mean, I go hang out in a comedy club. I'm not really sure, I don't have a whole lot of specifics there. Just have an open mind in who you're looking for, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I think, and I don't know if maybe you and Wes had these type of conversations, but I think if the advisor themselves is really clear on, hey, I want this to be funny, or hey, I want this to connect with a family with young children, or like whatever the goal is with the content that you want to create because you've already thought about who you want to attract, then that would be, the verbiage that you would kind of start talking to people about and say, hey, I'm looking for someone to help tweak my educational content into this style, right? Like I want it to be funny. I want it to be relatable. I want it to attract this type of person. So I think that would be really important. Did you guys have those conversations in the beginning or anywhere along the line?
I think we did naturally, even if we didn't know we were talking about it. That's why it was such a good match, because we just headed that direction. Or maybe I'd say something off the wall and Wes reacted in a way where I thought, oh, he liked that. I'm not going to hold myself back. I'm going to try this. And so it was such a great fit. One thing this comes to mind is I think why Wes is good at this is when you talk about interest rates going up or down or whatever, a lot of financial advisors will use terms like BIPs, I think, or like basis points, BIPs. And that's one example Wes uses of, what are you doing? No one knows what that is. Are you trying to sound smart for yourself or for your financial advisor buddies? If that's what you're trying to do, then go for it. But if you want regular people to know what you're talking about, you need to speak to them, And I think he was raised sort of on a farm. His dad was a large animal vet. So I think he comes from the right background to be able to blend that into his vast knowledge of the financial world now. So, I give him the credit for being open to what I was bringing. And I think that's what people need to do. So if the soundbite here would be less bips, more regular talk,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and as this relationship grew and they said, hey, we want you to host a podcast about how retirees can be happy. I mean, how did you feel about that? And how did that fully materialize?
Well, so I've always been comfortable. This is the way I describe it, talking to people's parents. Now I'm a little bit older. I'm in my 40s, but even when I was in high school, for some reason they liked my jokes, I guess. Say, I don't know, that I've been that dorky dad character basically since I was out of the womb. So that was such a great fit for talking to happy retirees now, which is who I interview on the show, because they're that demographic. And so we just kind of click. And I went to Wes and the marketing team and said, I have this idea. It was originally called the Core Pursuit Finder, and I was going to have a picture of, like Sherlock Holmes trying to find core pursuits, which are basically hobbies on steroids, the things you're really passionate about. It's a big part of Wes's lifestyle, tips for retirees. So I thought, okay, I'll find these happy retirees and the core pursuits they've found, and we'll talk about how those make people happy, or we'll talk about how those make them happy. And then maybe someone listening will say, hey, I really want to play pickleball, or I really want to hang glide naked, or what, I don't know what it is. Or even if they don't like that specific core pursuit, at least maybe it'll give them the inspiration to try something, because retiring and sitting on the couch is not usually going to lead to happiness. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people think it will. They think, once I stop working, I'll just automatically be happy because I don't want to go to work anymore. And so we've been trying to teach people to look at it a different way. You're not stopping, you're changing. You're now doing things you want to do. You don't have to do less. You just do different.
Yeah, different and more along the lines of a passion instead of a role that someone defined for you.
It's a rebirth in a way, because now you get to do what you want to do. Of course, you have to have the finances in place. So that's kind of a given, and not something that that I go into other than to say that's like a foundational piece. But now you can actually do the things you want to do. So it's kind of just this amazing opportunity. In a way, like when you're, when we're little, we always think about what we want to do when we grow up. And you get to revisit that moment a little bit. I had a couple as guests, and they loved playing the clarinet. And, life happened. They got married and had kids, and so they had to make a living. So the clarinet got put in the closet, but it would come out. The love was still there, but there just wasn't time to make that the priority. So as soon as their kids were grown and they retired, the clarinet came out, and they started really passionately focusing on it, and joined a group in Atlanta, and it led them all the way to playing at Carnegie Hall.
Oh my gosh.
I thought that was such an amazing story, because they got where they always wanted to go, even though they had to kind of start later. Yeah. It can still happen,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think it feels difficult for someone to find concepts like that aspirational, inspiring content to share on their show. And I think a lot of people are trying to design how do I educate but also inspire, make it relatable? There's all these boxes that we feel like we got to check when we're thinking about, okay, I want to have a podcast. What am I going to talk about? And so how do you, across the various podcasts that you write for, how do you feel like that balances out? Or just take us behind the scenes a little bit. What's some of the thought processes that you have there?
Well, you need to have a voice. You need to know what you want to say. If you don't have that, there's really no reason to do it, because you'll never get anywhere just stating facts. People can go read what the latest, numbers are. They don't need your show for that. So have a voice, know what you want to say, and then you can get better at doing it, which takes practice. I think what Wes does is he has his eye on breaking news, which he would use more on Money Matters, which is a weekly here's the latest type of thing. But then he has a bigger picture in mind of themes. So there are some themes that really are evergreen. So no matter what's going on in the market that week, people still want to know if they should pay off their mortgage or invest the money instead of doing that, or whatever the question would be. So those things are. He always keeps his eye on what's going on and relates it back to those bigger themes that he knows people are always going to have questions about. So he has his voice and he knows what he wants to say, and then he also keeps in mind what people are wanting to know, and crafts it all into this delicious stew. Or if you don't like stew, maybe it's a sweet tasting cake. I don't know if you have a savory tooth or a sweet tooth, but whichever.
Sweet, totally sweet.
Oh, sweet
every
tooth.
time.
Okay. My wife's a savory, so I get to eat more of the dessert, which is kind of nice. More for me.
Yeah, yin and yang. You got to have that balance there.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, I don't know if you have any examples of people you've worked with who were struggling. We might be able to go through and say, oh, they could have done this or that. But if they're wanting to do it, I feel like there's something there. Otherwise, they wouldn't want to do it. If their reason is, I should do this, that's not a good reason. The reason should be, I have an idea and I want to do this. I think it could be good,
Absolutely. And that's something I've started to speak out more about recently is like, out of all the podcasts that I've had the privilege to be behind the scenes with, the ones that are successful are the ones that, of course, go on much longer than, 10 episodes or so. Like we really start to see some great growth around like episode 80, episode 100. Like it's a long path, but those people aren't just podcasting, to reach potential clients. They're podcasting because they really just want to. They just want to educate, to share, to entertain, to build trust, to nurture, like whatever the reasons are. They really just want to speak out about their perspective. Yes, there's an educational element to it, but let's say it's interviews. They want to have people on like you, where you're having them share their stories. And it really is because they want to. There's no better way to say it.
Yeah. I don't know if you know who Ira Glass is. He's the host of This American Life. It's a really successful radio show and podcast.
I've heard of the This American Life, not Ira Glass, but yes. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
okay.
He created the show and hosts it along with others. But one thing he said that I always go back to is he was talking to people who wanted to start a show, and he was saying, listen, you you have good taste because you like good shows, and that's why you want to do this, because you want to contribute in that way. But you should look at it with open eyes that when you start, your show may not be good. It may fall short of your standards. Mm-hmm. Don't quit because of that. Push through, because eventually you'll get on the other side of that. I mean, I think people might start and think, well, I'm not amazing at this right away, so I'm going to quit. No one's good at it right away. I mean, very few people are good at it right away. Yeah. Wes has so many hours behind a microphone, and now he's really good at it. And so just keep it up, and eventually you'll come through if this is really what you want to do, and you'll really have something special.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something I want to highlight is you guys have 3 different shows going that I know of, and each of them has its own lane that it's operating within. So and we're definitely not saying that, any business owner needs to start 3 shows. That's a bit much.
That's the first step, starting 3 shows.
Right. So start them all at once. Just go nuts. But what I'm seeing across the board there is, in time, you've managed to attract a group of people that are being funneled in through that particular lane, right? And then you add another lane, and then you add another lane. And it depends. I mean, ideas develop, ideas morph and change and grow, and we all need to just kind of roll with it sometimes. In time, I think it's natural for any business owner who hosts a podcast to just naturally hit on various different subjects or lanes, as I first started this analogy. And through all of those, that's how we're attracting people to our business. As the writer and producer behind these, could you share a little bit about like the thought process for each concept, or, how does someone decide what they're going to podcast about, or that it's going to be strictly financial education, or it's going to be lifestyle, or it's going to be news, or like, how does someone decide that?
Well, I think they should keep in mind that no matter what they decide, it might not be perfect and they might need to adjust. So you have to be a little nimble in that way. But, the first step is thinking what you think the best is and trying it. For us, it evolved organically in a way because Wes was doing Money Matters Radio first, and that was that's like a hungry content beast. It's what's going on today, this week, kind of a trial by fire thing. So he did that for years before he decided, I want to try my own podcast called Retire Sooner that can really take a step back and, zoom out and think, how can I help more people retire sooner? That's why we called it Retire Sooner.
Yeah, clever.
Right.
It's got to be clear.
Right.
There's no questions.
So I think doing Money Matters helped him figure that out, because like this is a need that people have, and this is something I know a lot about. Mm-hmm. So that's a nice little combination there. Mm-hmm. And he had done and was still doing the news events of the day enough that he didn't need to do that again. He's already doing it. So for him, he's got two things going. So that might be a little different from someone you're talking to who's just looking at starting one. Maybe they would ask themselves, what am I more interested in? Talking about what happened this week? Or do I have a specific goal of helping 1 million people retire sooner than they thought? Or, whatever it would be. They need to, again, it kind of goes back to your voice or your mission. What makes them the most excited? I'd say start there. What makes them the most excited? Sometimes that's not exactly what you need to do, but it's definitely a good starting place, because then you can say, well, I want to do this. If I shift it a little to here, that might be a little bit more marketable or whatever, but at least I'm still kind of right here instead of way off on the side doing something I don't care about, and thus it won't really be good because I won't even want to be there, so why would someone listen? If the host doesn't want to be there, the audience won't want to be there for sure.
For sure. For sure. Can you share a little bit about the thought process behind your show and how you run your show as well? Just give us some clues on like, all right, cool, how do we do this?
I run my show like a tyrant. No. So I was working with the team, and I always bring up Wes. There's so many talented people on the team, and I was having a great time and wanted to keep doing it. But I thought I also have this idea of using sort of I have like a natural what's the word? Friendliness or something, and I'm not trying to brag. I have so many faults, but this seems to be one of my natural abilities is people aren't intimidated by me. They think, oh, this guy won't criticize me if I tell him what I want to do. I just kind of a friendly thing. So I thought that would work well for talking to these people who might be a little bit shy. They're not trained hosts. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. And so I might be able to put them at ease, and then they'll really open up and talk about what makes them happy in retirement. So I thought that could work. And so then we brainstormed the ideas and the themes, and we just said, let's just call it the Happiest Retirees Podcast, because that's what it is. And that really, that's a little bit more broad name than calling it the Core Pursuit Finder, because then people will always say, well, what's a core pursuit? And then you have to explain that. So Happiest Retirees, boom, we're in. You know if you want to listen to that or not. And then, of course, we'll make it as good as we can to try to bring more people in. But that's kind of what it was. And then I was lucky enough to have help finding happy retirees, because, I know some, but you want to find someone who's, like I mentioned, hang gliding naked. That's like, of course, not someone I've talked to, but that's just kind of like the off the wall example I use, because I want to talk to like the craziest core pursuit I can find. And there's people out there doing so many fun things. So I had help finding people doing those types of hobbies, and that the more interesting, the better. And then how do I run it? So, I mean, I have producers and a marketing team behind who do a ton of stuff that I don't know how to do. The interviews, you send out a questionnaire asking them the questions you want to know. They answer it. So that gives me something to go off of. But then I do that when I talk to the happy retiree. I want to leave space for them to go into other directions if they want.
Yeah.
And then, so once it's done, I would say one part that is actually hard, but I enjoy is writing the intro later and then recording like a kind of like a intro to it. That's when I can really use the writing skills I have and try to throw a little bit more personality into it if it calls for it. Sometimes it's a straightforward type of deal, but sometimes I can really, I don't know if I feel like wax poetic is not a it's that sounds too haughty, but I can kind of do a little stand-up comedy mixed with a message about the person, if that makes sense. And so that puts a little of my own flavor on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so that is also something that people may not realize that is happening behind the scenes. When they listen to a podcast and they hear this great intro with these enticing things that they're going to hear later in the interview, they're thinking like, how does that happen? How do they do that? And that is the way that I run this show as well. We sit here, we talk. Then after we say, thanks, bye, that was so cool. Okay, I'll contact you in a month, when the show's going to go live, whatever. Then I don't move because I want to make sure I'm like in the same position. My hair's the same, everything's the same.
Wow.
And then, because it's video.
Yeah.
And so I will sit here and pull up notes on my computer and write some things that stood out to me. And, maybe I don't have the comedic background as you do. I tend to be a little more serious. My kids tell me, Mom, you're not funny. So,
and you're saying, I'm not trying to be.
I'm not the funny one. That's Dad, but I sit here and I write it up, and I pull up a different program on QuickTime on my computer, and I record a video intro to the episode that I just recorded. So if you want to go on that a little bit more and tell us some more of your process, I'm sure it's not the exact same, but this is one way that's like a, behind the scenes method of how you get that great intro to the person, because you already know what you talked about. It's not this like secret process or whatever. So give us a few clues about how you do it.
First, I just want to say that as far as you not being funny and your husband being funny, dads really have a sweet gig. Because mom's always so busy making sure everything gets done, dad can float around.
Yes.
And say little jokes. All of a sudden, they're the fun one. It's really not fair. It's not fair at all.
It's not. It's not. And not to mention that, I think dads, and these are super generalizations, okay, folks. So if this is not your family, I apologize, but this is apparently our two families.
Yeah.
So dad is the one who, gets on the floor and rustles and has the wherewithal to like put some funny note on the wall or like, I don't know, he's the funny one. I don't know how to explain it. Like, I am the serious one. I'm like, did you brush your teeth? Like, your hair's a mess. Where's your back? Do you have a water bottle? Like, like, I'm sorry. That's my role.
Well,
I'm the serious one.
If you weren't there, they might be laughing all the way to the dentist because they'd have cavities or, they'd be dehydrated.
Yes.
So, what you're doing is almost like, again, it's like making sure you have enough resources for retirement, and then dad gets to come in and say, "Hey, let's go play pickleball," or now that we have
exactly. Yeah, you've got to have the balance here. I mean, it wouldn't work if we were both the funny ones. So, yes.
My wife sent me a video of it was like a mom getting the house ready for bed, and it was like from Harry Potter, where like the witch or whoever was making all the windows shut, like no spare moments. We're getting to bed, and dad comes in and like riles the kid up and makes it worse.
Yes.
So anyway, we're going off on this, but it's very fun to talk about.
It is fun, and I like that we both have this hand in production, but we're the opposite. You're the funny one. I'm not. So I think it's helpful to hear different ways that people can do this. And it's got to support your personality no matter who you are. Mom, dad, not a parent, whatever. Not the funny one. Okay, that's fine. Your intro's not going to be funny. It's fine.
Yeah. We need all types to make all this work. I would say, and along those lines, I'm so impressed you sit there and do the intro right then. I am not as disciplined as that. But I don't record my intro with video, which maybe I should. But if I did, I'd have to worry about what you're saying because, you need to look the same. I also don't do it in a way where I need them to think that I'm recording as they're sitting there because I'm sort of reflecting on the interview. So that's a choice. That's a stylistic choice. Yeah. Some people want it to sound like, I'm about to start. And but I do it more reflective. And in a way, not having a camera helps me because I've been told I smile a lot when I'm laughing, but when I'm not, my face sort of looks like I'm catatonic because I'm like so focused on. So if there were a camera on me as I'm coming up with these funny, in air quotes, ideas, it might look kind of weird. But because I write it up and then I try little things that you got to fail to succeed. So I try these little bits that don't work, and then I'm like, I got no, and then you kind of hear it right away, and you have to redo it. And so I just like being able to screw up, I guess, without anyone knowing.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is awesome, and I kind of wish I were more like that because it could be seamless, and then I wouldn't forget anything and have to like dig up the interview and
Well, thank you, but this is not necessarily the right way. Again, like you said, stylistic choices. But that is exactly my reasoning. Not only would I sit here and look the same, be in the same position, still have lipstick on, whatever. Again, man versus woman concerns here. But the interview is fresh. And so, like you said, I don't have to dig it up and go, God, well, like, what did I ask him? And what did we talk about? And, because honestly, I have to dive in and like listen to the full interview or be the one who edited it to be able to draft the show notes because I cannot remember. Like we will talk today and in 3 days or a day, I won't have a dang clue what we said.
I am not offended at all. I know what you mean. It's so weird. You can be totally involved in the conversation and then recall nothing. You need something to jostle the memory.
Well,
The
and
one advantage I have is my last name is Doolittle, so it kind of sticks out a little. As a kid, it was not an advantage on the
Right.
playground, but now I have the last laugh.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and
Yeah.
I can only imagine that you're probably a bit like me in that a lot of content comes across your desk. You're hearing it, you're seeing it, you know, it's part of your assignments. I mean, there's so much that we're hearing, seeing, reading, creating every day. I'm sorry, but like, I'm not going to remember an interview
Yeah.
beyond being in this exact conversation at this moment. That is why I sit there and do the intro immediately, because I will have this fresh in my mind. Whereas to draft show notes or social media captions or anything else, I have to go back and listen to the full episode and like try to pull out pieces of it. So yeah, tell me more. How do you, if you did step away from an interview and you did have to come back and create, you know, the title, the show notes, the intro, like what are all the pieces that you're working on after the fact? And how do you get in the mode or remember what they talked about? Like, what is your process there?
Yeah. So what I do is I do the interview, and then it goes into the can, as they'd say, and I go on, and I have a lot of other things that I have to do, so I do that stuff, and then my showrunner, her name's Mallory. She decides when something's gonna air. She decides when something's gonna be dropped, or I never know what to say for a podcast. And so then, as that's coming up, usually I wait a little too long. And anyway, my editor will do a draft of the episode, and they do a great job. But usually, I'll cut it. I'll go through myself after that and cut it down a little more. I think I've become more impatient as I've gotten older, and a little more worried about. I don't want anything boring, so sometimes I'll just cut more and get it down to a shorter time length. And then after that, after I've done that, part of the reason I like doing that is now I'm so aware of what was said. And the editor will pick out an opening. So this is the way we do it. At the beginning, we have an opening soundbite from the guest. And that comes before the intro or any of that. It's sort of like a nice, like, bam, here's what the person is like. Here's a bit of their personality. So usually they'll pick it. And most of the time they pick a great one. Once in a while I'll change it. But so that's in. Then I think to myself, okay, what do I want to, is there something I can really wow the audience with like an observation that could, like, in a friendly way, get us into this topic? So if I can do that, I'll do that. Then, you know, then you want to summarize a little bit so that they know what the episode is going to be about. And this is a little, I don't know, I'm still figuring out what I think about this, but ChatGPT is useful. And I don't say that because I think you can just rely on it and not have your own writing skills or any of that. But I think it is useful. Like, for me, I'll run it through sometimes, see what it comes up with, and then change it or, you know, scrap it, or sometimes it's great. And also you can, in this game, SEO, you know, like search engine optimization is so important. And I'm trained to be a writer. I'm not trained to be a search engine optimizer. So I would recommend ChatGPT for that sort of thing, because it can help you make it a little more like that. In a way, making it more SEO friendly can sometimes make it worse writing to me. So you have to find a balance, because it could be the best thing you've ever written, and if no one's going to read it or listen to it, then that's not great. So I do a little combination of the two. I mean, this Chat GPT thing is new. I used to not use it at all, and now I'm figuring out where it fits in my life. But so anyway, that I'll use all that to come up with the intro, and then I used to come up with these, like, what I considered clever titles, and they made me laugh. And my showrunner Mallory was sort of not impressed. She would say, people think these clever titles are great, but I want something that'll get more listeners. So in that way, making your title more SEO friendly is a good idea. So instead of trying to think how cool I am with my play on words, I'll try to make it more of an SEO friendly title. So that's how I would kind of do that, and then I would plug that in, and then I have a song that I use for every show that I just throw in there for at the beginning to sort of make it pop a little. Then I have a running intro that plays every single episode where I just explain what the show is. So it goes opening soundbite from the guest, then my personalized intro, then that evergreen intro that's like, here's the Happiest Retirees podcast. Here's what my mission, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes to the interview. So I don't know if did that answer the question?
Yeah. Well, and
Okay.
that even gave us even more about, because I don't think as a podcast listener, people are evaluating exactly what they're hearing and how to recreate it until they're in the process going, oh crap, like I wanted to make a podcast. Now, how do I do this? And that is my advice a lot of times is, okay, yes, we are going to help you create this standard intro that's on every episode. But there's also stylistic choices, like you said, the clip from the guest, the specific intro to the interview. If there's any other segments you want, like some people have like a little game show style question rapid fire thing going on. Like there's different segments to the show that are stylistic choices. And if you enjoy certain shows that you listen to on a almost like religious basis, like every time you do dishes, like you got to put on your specific, Money Matters or whatever, then like listen to those shows. What do you love about them? What catches your attention? What makes you stick around? And those are the segments that you almost want to personalize to your own brand and implement in your own podcast. So you gave us like the clip, the interview intro, the standard intro, and then the interview, which I think is a lot more than what most people would talk about in the production process. So
yeah,
that was great.
I love that how you encourage them to listen to a show they like and ask themselves, why do I like this? What do I like about it? Why do I specifically like it at this time of day or when I'm doing the dishes? Why is it working for this? Those are such good questions to find the answer to then apply to your own show. Because you want to make a show because you like other shows. I mean, that we're all we're all fans, and before we're creators. Yeah, and I would say stylistically, like. Well, this is more structurally or mechanically, but I had an editor, who would go through and do the first cut. He's really good, but he ended up moving on to other things, and so we needed a new editor. And I said, hey guys, my wife does not know the program we use. We use Adobe Audition. If that people are looking to know what to use, we like that one. But she's a writer herself, and she's really good at crafting narratives and knowing when something's not working. So I know she'll pick up Adobe if you give her a chance to edit, because the more important thing is like having a good ear for what's working and what isn't. And that's exactly so they hired her, and that's exactly what's happened. She's really good at chopping, and she's learned the craft part. I mean, she's learned the skills part, because she was already good at like the more important piece. And the side perk of having your wife be your editor is that she's not afraid to say, hey, you need to talk more, or like this part's boring because you're not doing this. She's not shy about that, which might hurt my ego in the moment, but it's such a valuable thing to have. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's my advice. Have your spouse be your editor. No, not everyone can do that.
Well, I was going to share a similar story is that for a little while, my husband took a step back from teaching. And so he was home and I said, well, I need a video editor. Do you want to give it a stab? And so, of course, first, few steps or whatever, he had a couple client shows, but he was primarily editing my show. And so he could really pick out like, well, you always do this, or you talk too much, or you whatever.
It's right. So, you kind of cringe, but it's what you need to hear. You know?
Yes, absolutely. If you can back up from being offended for a second, it can be really constructive feedback. I would also say that if that's not a possibility for someone or whatever, that's the value of actually editing some of your own stuff in the beginning. If, whether it be budget reasons or for whatever reason you want to dive in there and DIY things a little while, that can be beneficial. I mean, of course, I want to be the one editing this financial show, right, that we're theoretically talking about. But if you need to, it's super valuable to pick out your own flaws in a way and see yourself making the mistakes and say, oh, I didn't realize that I said, so often. God, I really got to stop saying that.
That's so true. Especially that phrase, or you don't realize you're doing it. And then you listen back and you think, yikes, why was I doing that so much? It's a similar line of thinking. But at one time I asked Wes, how did you get good at this? And he said, the only way I know to tell people is to listen to yourself over and over again and find those things you're doing that aren't helping, cut them out, or find what you're doing that is working and cut it. And so like you're saying, if you're editing your own show, at least at first, before they hire you, then you're going to be able to do that and you'll definitely improve.
And even things like, and and like, and so they come to mind, right? We all think about these verbal tics, but there are also, if you're doing video, there are things that you'll notice about the way you sit or your posture or where you look, or I talk with my hands too much, or my background is horribly distracting, or whatever you're going to pick out. And so it's this fine balance between diving into, oh, this is so unpolished and, I'm just going to quit because all I can do is criticize myself. So let's not go there. Versus finding a few things that are within your control that you can change or that you can work on. I have a tic, I guess, that I look off often during conversations. And I think in person, it's completely natural and nobody realizes it. But I see it a lot in my videos when you're saying something, I'm thinking about it. I'm here 100%. I'm not reading anything or whatever, but I'm looking off as I'm thinking, and maybe I'm coming up with my next questions, or it's prompting something within me. But I have that, and I'm thinking when I'm editing my videos, I'm like, where am I looking? What am I looking at? There's nothing in here to be looking at. So you'll just pick out things, whether it's visually or verbally. And there's different phrases verbally. Something that's come up a lot, I think it's a trend now, accidentally, is to say, and so. And so, and so, and so. There's never an end to a sentence because it just goes and so. So I end up cutting and making people have these finite sentences because that's what they're actually trying to say.
Yeah.
Instead of and so, and it's a paragraph long sentence. It's just a trend in the way that people speak, and we have to be careful not to cut all of them because then it sounds robotic. But there's various nuances to being behind the scenes, whether you're the producer, the editor, the creator, the host, wherever you're at. So on this train of thought, could you share anything else that you've noticed or seen, whether it's in yourself or someone you know?
Well, yeah, I would say, so speaking of backgrounds, if you look behind me, it says, and now that I don't have to be perfect, I can be good.
Yeah.
And I think that helps me. I tend to have a little bit of OCD, or a lot of that, if you ask my wife. And sometimes that I want to be perfect. And because of that, it prevents me from doing anything at all. So that mantra has helped me just start. And, nothing's going to be perfect. So do your best, make it good. Don't be overly critical, and I just said, and be okay with that. So you need to, I guess critical is not the right word. You need to study yourself and improve, but don't beat yourself up is another way to say it, right?
Yeah.
And I would also say that when you were talking about looking away, I've even in this interview, I've been looking away a lot because I think I'm like, my eyes are going into my cerebral storage bin of content or something. I don't know. And it may not be, sometimes it can look weird, and sometimes it's fine. It's natural. So you watch your own stuff and like you did, and kind of think, oh, it looks good there. Maybe I should not do it there. That's part of just practicing. As far as other tips, now it's all I can think about.
Don't worry about it.
And so, as far as other tips, what specifics would be helpful to hear?
I think I would love to hear about, anything specific that you and the team have discussed about, hey, we should try to do this, or or we're getting feedback in this way. Have there been moments of discussion like that with feedback?
Feedback from my coworkers has been that sometimes I don't talk enough. So I'll ask a question and the happy retiree has a lot to say, and I just let them talk because they're the star of that episode. But people are listening to the show not just for that. They've chosen this because they like you. So you have to remember that you're also the star of the show. And for some people, that's not a problem. They're the star of every conversation they've ever been in. But for others, it can be a struggle to say, hey, I need to talk. I'm important here. And so that's helped me. And again, my wife saying, you need to talk has really helped. And I try to throw in my own personality as we go. If I think of a joke, I say it. Sometimes they don't get it or it didn't fit. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes they don't get it, but it still works great. So that's a tip I would give. I would say the more research you can do beforehand, the better, because then you're not searching for it in the interview. It's interesting how much it can mean to the guest when you come in and say, so back in 1983, you ran a horse farm, and they feel like this person paid me the respect of looking into this, and they feel even more comfortable. And it just feels like two people who know each other chatting and having a great conversation instead of really having to pull it out of someone. The more research, the better. It's almost like an actor who memorizes their lines. That's just the first part. You need to memorize the lines and know them so well that you can play with them without thinking too much. So, and again, I'm not saying, I don't want people to be too precious about this. You don't have to spend 1 million hours reading everything about them, but the more you can do, the better would be another. And just listen. Listening is a big part. Sometimes I will get too much into my notes or too much into where I need to take the show, and then I'll realize I'm not listening to their answer. So I could have said something specific and valuable in the moment, but I was focused on what the next question was going to be. So I missed that opportunity. So really try to listen and just respond naturally as a human being would.
Yeah. That's such a great tip. I have had podcast hosts ask me, hey, like, I need a course on how to become a better interviewer. Like, I really want to hone my interview skills, and I'm trying to listen well, and I'm trying to come up with great conversation and questions, and I'm doing my research, and I just want to improve. And so that, honestly, for me as a producer has even been a challenge, because sure, I can hear where someone almost like interrupts their guest, which really frustrates me. And if we're talking about an audio editing process, I can give it some space there artificially to make this conversation sound a little bit better. But if you're on video, it's kind of tough.
It's a big jump cut, right?
Yes,
or something.
right. Camera switch, something.
Yeah.
And, but in time, I think that's one of the greater, more mature desires, I think, of podcast hosts is to be a better interviewer. And I'm sure that your skills in that area have adjusted and honed and focused. Could you share with us anything else that you've learned along the way, whether it be about, writing for Wes's show or being the host of your own show? Like, what are some lessons that you would give us to take away today?
I would say another thing that came to mind was when you're recording your intro, it's a lot harder than it seems like it would be to sound natural and interesting and energetic. And I realized at first I sounded bored. And I'm like, why am I bored? I'm the one who's writing this and talking. So I sound bored. Okay, so now let me try to use more energy. Well, now I sound crazy. Now I sound like I'm doing an ad for used televisions or something. So it's been hard to find that balance. And I just noticed I was doing one last night. I noticed that I was better at it without trying because, and when I say without trying, I have tried.
It's
all the time I've spent practicing. But I recorded something and I thought, oh wait, that sounds good, and I forgot to worry about it.
Awesome.
So so that's one thing would be okay with it being harder than you think. Practice. Always practice is the best. And even if you need to do some episodes that don't air, that might be good. I'm sure you have people in your life who would do that for you. They'll be your pretend guest. Because sometimes it's hard to, if you bring an actual guest on, I mean, they want their thing to air unless they're just super nice. They're giving you the time. So the more you can practice before you get to that, the better. What else have I learned? I've learned sometimes when you do ask your guest to tell you about their life or their backstory, that's a part that I try to get to before I get into how to be happy in retirement. I want to hear a little bit about them. If you just say, hey, tell me about your life, some of them will go off for 45 minutes about it, and not always in an interesting way. And so then you can edit it down, but it's a little hard because you're cutting things out, and now the thing they said a minute ago doesn't make sense, because it's gone. So you cut out that part. Now they're talking about it again, and the listener's thinking, what are they talking about? So it's better to edit for lack of a better term, it's better to edit in camera. It's better to be good at guiding them and politely cut them off or nudge them out of that incredibly specific story from 1971, and try to get more to back on track. We want to hear the highlights, but we don't need to hear about line item 6A of your taxes in 1983, So that would be another piece of helpful knowledge, I guess.
Yeah. Almost like craft your questions specifically instead of saying, hey, like, tell me about your life. Like, they're going to start sometimes, right? Like, especially, and I love speaking with older people and retirees. And, if I could just talk to like all the people that are 90 to 110 or whatever the oldest person is that I could get I would do that all day, right? Because I love those stories. But they have a lot to share. They've lived a long life. They've got so much that they could tell you. And some of them may try to start at, when they were 5. So you might be sitting there for a while. So it's that challenge of, okay, how do I give them the floor, but also somehow cap this question at a certain time period or length of answer or something like that. So that's where that interviewer practice comes in, I guess.
Exactly. Yes, I like how you said that. Ask specifically for what you want to hear rather than relying on them to do it, because it's not their job. It's your job to shepherd them.
Yeah, really. That's what it is. And I think there's not really a way to get great at that without the practice. I mean, unless you've been in speech and debate and whatever, any speaking classes or whatever, and that's been your thing for a long time, you're probably not going to naturally be a great interviewer. So just expect that learning curve. And even if you're not planning on having an interview show, there's going to be a piece of delivery that is on your shoulders, of course, and you're still going to have to craft and hone that skill. So
yeah, I tried to describe this earlier, but in a way, the better you get, the more you're already editing as you're doing it live, because you've edited or been through it so many times that this part isn't working, so I'm just gonna shift us to here, and then you actually end up saving yourself or your editor time because you're not even having as much chaff. Do you separate the wheat from the chaff? The wheat is the good part, right?
I have no idea.
I don't know what the chaff is. Maybe chaff becomes like the whey protein powder or something. I don't know. But you get what I'm saying, right? So you want to cut as you go if you can. You're not going to really be able to do that at first. But as you get better, start thinking of ways to do that. You will not regret it.
Yeah, absolutely. This was such great insight from someone who's been behind the scenes and on several shows for a long time, which is really, really valuable. And I appreciate all of this great advice. Ryan, could you just share a little about where to find and follow you, and if people want to listen to these different shows to get inspiration?
Yes.
Where do we do that?
Thank you for asking. That's great. So if you go to yourwealth.com, that's YOUR wealth.com, you can find everything. So if that's the only thing you remember, go to yourwealth.com. On Instagram, go to Retire Sooner Team. If you happen to be somewhere where you can listen to radio, listen to WSB Radio, listen to Money Matters, the Happiest Retirees podcast would just be under Retire Sooner Team on Instagram. We're on YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Ryan Doolittle. I think that pretty much covers it. We're on Facebook. We're everywhere, but go wherever you want to go and start at yourwealth.com. Awesome. And I should say real quick, I'm going to be transitioning a bit from the audio version of the Happiest Retirees podcast to a video series. And it's called Try and Ryan. And so I'm going to be going out and trying these core pursuits that you might think about doing yourself as you look for a happy retirement. So I think it promises to have some funny moments as I'm a clumsy fish out of water trying to learn how to hang glide naked, as I said. So keep an eye on that. That'll be a YouTube video series, and I'm excited about that. So that'll be coming out mid-April.
Okay. Yeah. Very cool. So right around the time that people are listening to this, we'll get to go search for that series. That'll be super exciting. Thank you so much. Anything else you want to add last minute, or do you think that covers it?
I would say just make sure you go out and hire Virginia for your production needs for your podcast. She obviously knows what she's doing. And thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time and all the great advice that you have. Thank you very much, Ryan.
Thank you.